the Inker Jack Abel post for this. I remember I got somebody up at Neil Adams' continuity that posed for that one, but this is Bernie Wrightson posing here. I think that was me.
Yeah, really?
It was Dinah, my ex-wife, posed for that one. She actually wore that silly wig that we had just for that purpose. This one was kind of interesting. It was when I first started coming back to Marvel and getting a little political at that point, so I decided to do all these world leaders. And it's kind of interesting going through and see who has not survived. I mean, we have a lot of dead people on this page at this point. Fortunately, some of us have still survived. And I don't remember too much about. These pages are from the book that got Thanos into the movies, basically. Josh Whedon, this young man, apparently read these things and fell in love with the book, and there wouldn't have been any movie Thanos if he hadn't actually read this particular book, I think. He was the one who talked him into using Thanos as the big bad guy throughout their series before him and Marvel parted company. So I owe Josh big on that one. These are kind of things, these were all done in this area. I lived over in Oakland at Oakland and Berkeley when I was doing all these Warlock pages. All this rubber cement still seeping away and turning brown over the years. It'll never stop. This is one of my favorite Warlock covers. It was inked by the great artist Alan Weiss. Unfortunately, some of it seems to be fading at this point. I always thought he worked with Indian ink, so Indian ink usually doesn't fade. He may have done something with some kind of felt tip on those, which is unusual for Alan. And this one here is a cover that we've done so many times. Alan Milgram and I, this looks like it might have been the original one, because originally John Romita Jr., or John Romita Sr., rather, who was the art director of Marvel at the time, used to replace heads all the time for the covers because he thought Stan wanted a head to look a certain way, and this head didn't look that way, so it got covered over with a John Romita head for the longest time. It looks like somebody removed it somewhere along the line. You can see where the paint used to go, it's a shame. Yeah. This was an interesting one because we had done the Infinity Gauntlet in the War, and this was the third book, like the third miniseries. It was called the Infinity Crusade, and it was the religious or righteous aspect of Adam Warlock's personality coming out as opposed to the Magus's evil side. And so what we did at that point was try and figure out what all the Marvel characters' religions were. Some of them was quite easy. There was a story that showed that Sue Storm was a Catholic, and we figured Doctor Strange would be a Buddhist, but a lot of them we had to really go through and do some research on. And when we got done, we were very surprised, everyone was surprised to find that Marvel Comics, which had been created by almost exclusively by New York Jews, they didn't have one Jewish character inside the comic book company, inside the cast of characters, which made sense because it was the 1960s, and they were trying to stay mainstream, and they sort of avoided that sort of thing. Apparently, Ben Grimm, the Thing, has become Jewish since then. So there's at least one Jewish character. What we ended up doing at the end was there's a character called Sasquatch here, and he was from Poland, and he was sort of nominated at the time of being Marvel's first Jewish character. And Gilgamesh is kind of fun because when I first got into the business, everybody wanted to do a Gilgamesh story in comics as a barbarian, because Conan was very popular at that time. And no one ever quite got around to it, but they always talked about it at cocktail parties. And eventually, Dick Giordano, who was the editor up at DC at the time, approached me to do a science fiction version of it. And this is what came out of it. And I worked on a few things that weren't in the original epic poem. There was sort of a homosexual relationship between Gilgamesh and I forget what the other's name was. But that was always kind of strange. Breed, Red Star, my first creator-owned thing of any length. He was always fun. I wish I would always kept him inside that hooded outfit. I think I made a mistake when I put him in this blue outfit, but, you know, hindsight, everybody's got it. I was working on Darkland the Mystic for Eerie magazine, and Wheezy Jones, who is now Wheezy Simonson, was the editor at the time. And she thought I was going to turn in the third installment of this particular story, but what I did was do this 5-page story instead. And it was kind of a sick story about a guy killing his girlfriend. It was kind of a mood thing. And when I turned it in, it turned out that Wheezy had already had the name Darkland on the cover. It was already on the way to the printer. So we had to end up doing this last page where we threw Darkland showing up just to comment on the previous story. So that got thrown in really on the last moment there. This is also an early painting. This is from a portfolio we did called Camelot 4005, which was early learning how to paint, basically. And I did these things in black and white just because I didn't have to play with color that way. And they couldn't print it in color at that point anyhow. So, but I always liked that, some of the stuff in here. I love that figure. He's got a nice, dark, sick feel to him. I think that's supposed to be Mordred, if I recall right. Morgan Le Fay and Mordred. Here was the most troublesome story I ever worked on, The Death of the New Gods. Everything that could go wrong with this story did go wrong. I guess there's been some worse ones, but this one gave me the most nightmares. And this is from a book called The Cosmic Odyssey that Mike Mignoli ended up drawing. I was going to draw it, and for some reason, which escapes me at this point, I didn't have the time or what have you, and Mike ended up taking over the job. And what DC wanted at the time was for me to do something that they had done similar in a book called The Book of Magic, which sort of charted out all of their mystical characters. And they wanted me to do the science fiction characters. And I sort of forgot about that. And I sort of did my own story. And they didn't like it. And they said, well, we'll just put this thing out. It'll disappear and no one will ever worry about it or, you know, be concerned with it again. They've been having to pay me royalty checks on it for the last 25 years because it hasn't gone away. And it's become a big hit. And I'm not sure how many people remember the Book of Magic at this point. Yeah. My revenge on the editors. This is a tremendous honor coming and seeing this. I am so glad we finally made it. This is an incredible ego trip. What can I tell you?